Hey, what's good, people, man? Platinum Bearded Dread. Question, man. What are we feeding our children? Now, right now, I'm not talking about food yet. I'm talking about mentally. Food is another topic altogether, but and a big one. But what are we feeding our children? I asked this question here because I work with children, and there was one day I was working with children that were playing football, and for me, football is. I mean, I can't play football to save my life, but football, and I don't even watch it. But for me, I guess what makes me a decent quote-unquote coach is that I use it more for working together, teamwork, building confidence, as well as inclusion, you know what I mean? So whether it's a boy or girl, young or slightly older, or they have additional needs, I always make sure that all are catered for and all engage with each other. And I always say to them that it's about not the goals that are scored, but the team that help the person score the goal working together. And but anyway, that's off the subject. But we was in the middle of playing football, and one of the boys was bullying some of the other children. So I picked up on it. And one thing I don't like with children is bullies. I think that's the one thing that turns me off. I love children, but it's one thing that turns me off are bullies. Even though I know that there's a backstory for even bullies, it's not a natural thing. But anyway, so I said I sent him out. I sent him out of the football cage, and he went off storming, kicking, you know what I mean, thumping and all of that. Continued with the match. And next minute I heard the children come in saying, "Sir, he's throwing stuff." Looked at the corner of my eye, and he had a big old bin that he was just throwing around. And so I went to him. I said, "Look, put it down." And he had it ready to throw at me. I said, "Put it down." And he put it down reluctantly. And then he called me, you know what he called me? He called me a nigger. Now, the reason why I raised this is because that's not really a big deal. I've been called worse, but this boy is mixed race. So he called me a nigger. And in my mind, I thought, this is kind of sad, really, because we're talking post Black Lives Matter, whatever that means. But in this day and age, the boy must have been it wasn't that old, only about 10, only about 10 years old. And you have, with everything going on, George Floyd and all the stuff going on around the world, police killings and stuff like that, killing black people, you have a mixed race boy calling a black teacher a nigger. And I couldn't but help, first of all, I said to him, "You're not coming back in this football pitch until you apologise." So I left that as it was. But anyway, first of all, I couldn't help but think, what are we as parents teaching our children? Particularly in this climate, like I said, of this whole racist climate that seems to be bubbling around the world. And I really felt sorry for that child because he's of mixed heritage. So he's going to be completely confused growing up in terms of his identity and in terms of certain truths that are hidden. And I guess this is a message to all of us, but particularly parents that have children of mixed heritage, specifically black and white. You know, it's different when you have a Chinese and black, or even an Indian and black. Even though there are challenges there, because let's not lie. Many of the Asian girls I spoke to have been honest enough and said to me that their parents wouldn't even want a black person to step on their doormat. That's how deep it gets. Chinese are not much different. But the difference, the reason why I'm addressing black and white is because with Chinese and Asian, and Hispanics, they've got a culture that runs back thousands of years. The European is slightly different. See what I mean? So there's less respect for other cultures in that sense. Hence why it was so easy to, we know the backstory of slavery and everything like that. But what I'm trying to say is, I really feel for the child, because this really is a message to parents who have mixed heritage children, that it really ain't about them, it's about the child, and equipping the child to be knowledgeable to navigate through this world as he grows. Because let's face it, this world, the Western world, and not even just the Western world, but the world in general, puts black people at the very bottom. You know, we're not a loved people around the world. We really ain't. I mean, you can go to Africa and you'll see white people being treated better than black people. You can go to the Caribbean and you will see white people being treated better than black people. So it doesn't matter where we are. We already know the story about America. And even England is no different. So we already know the story, but we're just not a loved people. And that's not a pity story, because we know, well, there's a reason for that. But back to the boy and back to the parents. I don't think we realise how crucial it is that we have to equip our children with a knowledge that we as parents who may have, I don't have mixed race children, but for those who do, we may find uncomfortable. I always put it like this, yeah. Imagine a fish being raised in dirty water, murky water, from when it was born. That's all it knows. You see what I mean? And if you put that same fish in clean, fresh water, it's going to be a shock to the system. Imagine, it will be a shock to the system. It may even die, but just imagine that that's all it's known. And the average 99.9% of white people on the planet, they've been raised like that in a climate, culture, if you like, of white supremacy, which basically means that everything that is white is extolled and put at the top, and everything that is black is oppressed and put at the bottom. And you know what I mean, just in basic terms. But that's all they know, and it's filtered. It's filtered in every avenue of social life. You know, education, law, government, health, entertainment. Did I say that already? Entertainment. It doesn't matter where you look. The notion that whites, in history of course, the notion that white people are the definition of greatness, beauty, achievement, and refinement, and black people are savages. It's filtered in every form of asset of social life. So for the average white person, they don't. You can't fully blame them, because that's all they know. That's all they're used to. Remember, we're talking centuries, not just a few decades. So, you know, the average person will be born. You know, they'll look around and they'll see billboards, adverts extolling whiteness. I remember there was a time when we didn't have cable, and I had to do this myself. You could flick through all the channels. You'd never see a black person, never. You'd have to keep flicking, and maybe half an hour later you might see a black person on the channel. But imagine what that does to the average black child or the average white child. And now if you do flick through the channels, you're just going to see them singing or sports. Again, that has a subconscious effect on the potential of a black child and expectations of a black child, as well as a white child. So what I'm saying is that it's so deeply embedded in the average white person's psyche that you can't fully blame them when they don't understand, you know, certain realities. Like, for instance, even on the basic level, how many white people know that the first people to walk the planet, the first prototype of a human being in all its perfection was black people? When I say perfection, I'm not talking about from the point of view that they're better than, but meaning that, you know, when you make a model and it's the first blueprint, and then you make many models after that, that's simple. If you understand what I'm trying to say, for black people, which is why the scientists of this world, European scientists, had to go to Africa, because that's where they had what they referred to as the blueprint, the prototype human being. But not just that, they were the first, black people, the first people to circumnavigate the earth via ships, boats. We're taught that we can't even swim, we're scared of oceans. You know, we're the first people to bring science, mathematics, military strategy, farming, basically the foundation for everything you see in the Western world, everything from the skyscraper to the rocket to the internet, was based on the contributions by black people. Many black people weren't even allowed to voiced their inventions during slavery because the masters, their quote-unquote masters, took that invention from them and claimed it as their own. So all these things we see that help to advance the world, we assume that they were pioneered and contributed by whites, when in reality they took those the inventions from blacks. I mean, this is just surface stuff. You know, when we talk about Christianity, for those who believe that there was a Christ figure, whatever that means to you, how many people in the Deep South that love Christ are willing to accept that Christ was a man of colour, black man? You know what I mean? How many? There's so many layers to this. Some white people would have a problem, but many might, and it depends on how deep we go. You know, how many white people would be prepared to accept the fact that the way the world is right now, for the most part, it's not black people that are really causing the problem. You know, if I ask you, what state do you think the world is in right now? Most people are not going to be jumping for joy, and you know, if you want to talk about this whole the V word, it's not black people that are pushing that, mandating that. If you want to talk about poisoning the soil and poisoning the food, it's not black people doing that. If you want to talk about poisoning the oceans, the fish, the animals, it's not black people doing that. If you want to talk about polluting the air, it's not black people doing that. We may have followed suit, but it's not black people bringing that into the world. And if I was to say to you that this whole world has to be destroyed so that there can be a new world to come in, but the people that are going to head that world, and when I say head, I mean the people that are going to need to be listened to are the people that have suffered the most and still have love in their heart for forgiveness. And there's no other people on the planet that have suffered as much and are prepared to forgive as much, even to the point of where you look at them and say, well, I wouldn't even do that, are black people. And that's not, again, to say that they are better than, but what it means is that it's going to take a humble soul like that to usher in a new world, because this world, and the examples I gave, are showing that based on the European mentality and their leadership is not working. I think it's very important as a parent of mixed heritage children to be prepared to allow that child to learn everything there is to learn. There's going to be things that you might be uncomfortable with. Some people have referred to the white man as the devil. Rather than say, oh, that's this, that, or that's that, look into what they're saying and why they're saying it. You know? Some people have said that white people came from this or came from that. But rather than shun it and try to protect your child, quote unquote, look into it. If you don't want to, at least let your child to learn it. Because there's going to come a time where your child is going to be faced with all these questions that they were not prepared for. And if you love your child, which you do, you have to be prepared to allow them to see the full cycle of things. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some black people there that want to go on a tirade and say, you know, white people are inferior and white people are this. And for me, I'm not talking from that point of view because that's dangerous. But I'm talking about, there are speakers out there who are not motivated by superiority or by hatred, but just by giving the truth. And when you listen to these kind of people, it would give your child a balance. You know, you look at a man like Bob Marley, when he was coming up, even he had to deal with a colour issue because he wasn't quite white, but he wasn't quite black. I'm not sure if he got bullied in his early years, but he had to deal with the whole issue. But the difference is that 99% of his circle were black, including his mum, who raised him. So if you look at Bob Marley now, you forget that he was a mixed-race man, but at the same time, he understood that his message was for all. But the reason why he was able to give that message to all is because he wasn't running away from anything. He said God is black in one of his interviews. Now that might curl the toes of some white people, but that's what he said, you know what I mean? And but he wasn't running away from anything that was out there. He wanted to learn. And I think that's the most important thing, you know, that you allow your child to learn and to grow, so that it'll be well balanced when they, when they go out into the big world, so to speak. There's certain people you can listen to, like I said, who are not motivated by hatred. That I would suggest Minister Farrakhan, Francis Cress Weldon, Malcolm X. There's many, but don't be afraid to expose them to this, so that it will set them on their journey, and they'll be balanced. And they won't. It's that potential that their behaviour, indirectly or directly, will blame you because you didn't help them to become equipped with what they needed to know in a world where it seems like, even though the younger generation are coming together, the older generation, the racist generation, are still running this world, and we need young people who are balanced, who are not afraid of the truth. And your child needs to be a part of that. But anyway, man, what's your thoughts, man? What you feed your children, what we feed our children? Platinum Bearded Dread. Yeah, man.